Josh, please take your seat, young man. All right. This morning, we are going to talk about
I think we'd
genetics.
better call the cops. What do you think?
Hey, if he doesn't show up, let's meet at the cafeteria at 6 and go look for him.
But the cops would tell my parents.
Great. My first real investigation.
The ObsCure series offers quality horror experiences in the mid-2000s heydays of the sixth generation of gaming. They have their own quirks and flair to stand out from other titles of this time frame. The first game uses a high school setting, while the sequel uses university. Both underutilized settings in the world of horror gaming, despite being ripe for usage. Both ObsCure games serve as nice period pieces of the mid-2000s, a showing of the hold high school had on pop culture. While taking place in America, French studio Hydravision Entertainment developed the games. Some of those European touches give the game a unique flavor that you won't find elsewhere. Both games have their merits and drawbacks. The first ObsCure has a more arcade-like feel to its gameplay. The sequel addresses some of the first game's shortcomings, but loses some of its unique feel. It's a case of a few steps forward with a few steps back. It's a sequel that feels a bit more by the books and generic. That said, they're well worth checking out if you're a fan of what I cover on the channel. A few things of note before beginning. If you're playing on a PC, check the Steam guides for the first game to get it running in widescreen and with a controller. For the sequel, getting widescreen working is a bit of a mess. While the cutscenes will run in widescreen by default, the game itself is in 4:3. While the first game setup is a simple drag and drop for widescreen, the second requires some hurdle jumping, ones that didn't work for me or caused glitches. Hence my footage being in 4:3 for the second game. Your mileage may vary in how those solutions work. For this video, I didn't play the spin-off title Final Exam. I will touch upon it at the end. I'd like to thank my fellow Boulder Punchers who support the channel through Patreon or YouTube memberships. If you'd like to receive early access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic updates, and my undying gratitude, consider joining your fellow Boulder Punchers in supporting. With that, class is now in session.
Looks like we got ourselves into a real sticky situation.
ObsCure takes place in the fall of 2003 at Leafmore High School. Everything about this intro screams MTV. The way it's shot, the music, it wouldn't look out of place as some reality TV show on MTV during this time frame. Depending on what version you play, the music playing will differ. For the current PC release, it's a rock instrumental that sounds like backing music you'd hear from a reality show on MTV at the time. If you're playing the release version, such as the PlayStation 2 or Xbox, the song used is Still Waiting by Sum 41. The current PC version is an unfortunate victim of expired licenses for music tracks. The song used instead isn't a huge downgrade, but one to note. And on the note of Sum 41, as of writing, they're in the midst of their farewell tour. The tour of the setting Sum is to wrap up in early 2025 as the band calls it quits. Well, for now. You know how lucrative these farewell tours can be. Nostalgia is a powerful drug. We're introduced to our cast of 5 playable characters. Kenny Matthews, the captain of the basketball team and the jock of the crew. Shannon Matthews is Kenny's younger sister. She's the brains of the group, excelling on all areas academic related. That said, she does maintain a bit of a rebellious streak. Ashley Thompson is the school beauty and cheerleader, and girlfriend of Kenny. Josh Carter is the inquisitive one, always with a camera in hand looking for any kind of scoop to run with. Rounding out the cast is Stan Jones, the slacker of the group and Kenny's best friend. Leafmore High has a bit of a checkered past. There have been disappearances of students over the years at the school, about a dozen over the last 5 years. Some students report hearing awful screams coming from beneath the school. And yet, despite all this, the school remains open. You'd think as a parent, they may want to send their children elsewhere. Kenny sticks around to shoot some hoops. He has a chat with Ashley about their date later that night. While on the phone, someone comes in and steals Kenny's bag. Following the thief, Kenny ends up underneath the school grounds. These dingy rooms are full of cages, drugs, and operating tables. Kenny comes across someone locked up, one who's been under extensive experimentation.
Please. No, have pity, no. No more.
What the hell is this place anyway?
Hey.
Please,
Hey,
don't hurt me.
chill out.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
Huh? Oh, you fell for it too.
Fell for what?
You don't get it? We've got to get you out of here quick.
With this man in tow, we head back the way we came. On the way back, these monstrosities emerge to attack us. Kenny is unable to make it before someone seals off the entrance. The next day at school, Ashley, Shannon, and Josh realize something is wrong. They meet up after school in the cafeteria to look for Kenny. Something seems very off and wrong in the after hours of the school. After a short stint of exploration, we'll end up in the school's attic. Monsters attack us before one of the teachers, Mr. Walden, comes to save the day. We also learn these monsters' weakness to light.
What are you doing here?
You've got to get out of here. Quick.
But those things, there, what are they?
I don't know. I'll make it my business to inform the authorities.
Looks like you hurt yourself.
It's nothing. Just get out of here.
He unlocks the courtyard for us and tells us to find Professor Friedman. The courtyard serves as our central hub for our journeys. Josh's camera runs out batteries, and Ashley's cell phone has no reception. A plot point you could get away with this game's release window of the mid-2000s, although I'm not sure why they didn't have her phone's battery run out instead. With that, it's time to explore Leafmore High, find the principal, find Kenny, and get to the bottom of this mystery. Despite its survival horror roots, there is a bit of an arcade-like feel to ObsCure. Something that you could owe to its co-op feature. You can have a co-op buddy on the couch with you, or have the AI control the other character. You could swap between the two selected characters at any time. This arcade-like feel carries over to how the game controls. While the game makes use of fixed camera angles, and does a fantastic job with them, controls handle more like a conventional title. ObsCure forgoes using tank controls. We can move and shoot at the same time, although shooting handles on a lock-on basis as opposed to precision aiming. For what the game is going for, it's perfect with the co-op setup. Each of the 5 playable characters have a unique ability and different stats. Shannon, the brains of the group, gives the player a hint, whether on what to do next or where to go next. Although in most cases, her default hint will be, let's check this place out.
Let's see what's in here.
Check out the brains on Shannon. You know, a lot of modern games should take heed of this ability. Instead of having a character spelled out to us every 5 seconds, make it an option if we need guidance. Shannon's more useful ability is the additional 25% healing bonus to herself or companion. As it doesn't take much damage to slow your movement or outright kill you, this bonus is a godsend. The Inquisitive Josh can let you know if there are any more items to pick up in a room. Objects or clues blink by default with Josh. It's not difficult by any stretch to find all items in the room. Characters' heads will snap to an item when in distance. Still, it's handy to have available.
I'm positive there's still something left.
Between this and Shannon's healing, I stuck with these two for most of the game. Although if we need someone more skilled in combat, Ashley is the best choice. Her ability allows for 2 rapid shots with a gun or a second swing with a melee weapon. Stam will know if there are any locks in the room. He could pick a lock faster than the other 4. Kenny, who we will rescue a good portion of the way in, can sprint. Handy in situations if you want to get out of a room in short order to avoid further combat. You could beat the game with any set of characters that you want. Nothing locks you out if one of them dies, as their death is permanent.
Shannon? No!
That is, unless you reload a previous save. We could save anywhere we want, but we'll need a disc item on hand to save. Something that the game is stingy with. The first stretch of the game is its trickiest. While the game is generous in providing guns and ammo, you'll need to seek them out first. It doesn't take much damage from enemies before we'll limp around and die upon further damage. I found myself swapping characters in the game's earlier stretch due to low health and the lack of healing supplies. While melee is an option, guns are ideal as they give us space between us and the enemy. As we saw in the cutscene with Mr. Walden, these creatures are weak to light. We'll need to use a light source to open up enemies for an attack. You could shine a flashlight on enemies, which we can tape to our guns to open them up for a kill. A similar approach to Alan Wake. As mentioned, ObsCure takes a more classic survival horror approach to its aiming. It doesn't use precise aiming, but a lock-on. There's a fun early game option that disappears as the sun sets. We could do like Mr. Walden did in that cutscene and smash open windows. This will flood a room with light and kill enemies outright. Handy in the game's earlier stretches before stocking up on ammo and before the sun sets.
That hurts.
Besides, smashing windows and breakable objects is so satisfying. Like smashing open vending machines. You may find an energy drink within to restore your health. I have to commend how well ObsCure handles character and item swapping. If you want to swap an item from one character to the other, it's a simple in-game process to do. If you want to swap characters out, you go up to them and hit a button to swap them in. And if you want to swap gear, it's quick and easy to give one item or hand over the entire inventory. With an AI companion, you have the option of commanding them to follow, stay still, or switch to a different weapon on hand. AI partners can always be spotty, but I never found them to be an issue in ObsCure. It's obvious the team put a lot of thought and work into making the swapping process so effortless. After all, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. For most stretches of the game, the courtyard serves as our hub. Our remaining companions that we haven't selected will wait here. We'll head off to nearby sections to get to the bottom of things. At most points, we can open up the pause screen to warp back to the gathering point at any time. No need to walk back. Not that it's ever a long walk. Once we complete key objectives, the game even lets us know, hey, you're done here. Now is a good time to work back to the gathering point. To be honest, it's a feature I didn't think the game needed. The school is small enough as is. Besides, backtracking is part of the survival horror equation. As we progress, the gathering points will change. When we get to stretches further away from the courtyard, the rest of our crew will move over to the new spot. Beyond a couple puzzles, ObsCure is all about finding an object to use elsewhere in order to progress. The school unfolds as the night goes on. It fits well for the more arcade-like feel of the game, something the sequel would dial back on and instead introduce more puzzles into the fold, something that results in a few steps forward with a few steps back. But we'll get to that shortly. Giving the player full control of character choice does result in some drawbacks. In the game's opening cutscene, each character's personality is on full display. This shifts as the game progresses. ObsCure needs to account for the possible combinations and choice of characters when it comes to cutscenes. For example, early on we meet Stan, who will join up with us. Whether playing as Shannon, Josh, or Ashley, this cutscene more or less plays out the same. Stan's dialogue is the same. The dialogue for the other three is more or less the same, with a change in word here and there.
Nothing, dog. I'm just editing my notes. If you want, I can do the same for you for only $50.
Hey, stop joking around. Okay?
And you? Why are you hanging around? Is something wrong?
What?
Haven't you seen in the hallways? All the monsters creeping around. It's a real hell.
It's a real hell.
Whoa, dog. I don't know what you've been smoking, but you need to stop.
But don't tell me you didn't see anything.
You didn't notice anything bizarre?
Yeah, everything I see up in this piece is whack.
So what do you think those noises are?
It's not funny.
We can't find Kenny.
What? You better quit jerking me.
Even Mr. Walden was injured. He had to go to the infirmary.
We're stuck here.
We gotta tell Friedman we want to get out of this school.
Whoa, your story's starting to get interesting.
This carries over to the other cutscenes in the game. As a result, the game doesn't give many chances for the characters' personalities to shine through. This does also carry over to the gameplay. There aren't cases of characters having short, unique talks with one another as we journey through Leafmore, like if Kenny and his girlfriend Ashley are together, or Kenny and his sister Shannon are together. Think something like the BioWare titles, how your companions would banter with one another in various combinations. I'm not saying we needed full-blown conversations, but a line or two of unique dialogue depending on our character selection would have gone a long way. It's something that the sequel would course correct. Yet the solution used is a bit of a double-edged sword. It solves one issue but creates new ones and loses some of the unique charm of the original. But hold that thought for now. I don't want to say the characters come across as one note as a result. The game gives plenty of room to breathe, something that terrifies modern game writers. One's afraid to let characters forego talking for more than 5 seconds. Still, giving the characters a bit more chance for their personalities to shine through would have made for a better experience. On the topic of notes, ObsCure delivers in droves on the music side of the equation. You have plenty of dark strings doing a great job of building a haunting atmosphere. Some give a darker Harry Potter feel, but its choir tracks are the game's signature. Its calling card. Tracks sung by the children's choir of the National Opera of Paris. The game's composer, Olivier Derivière, made the choice of a children's choir to capture innocence. It seems like it would be out of the wheelhouse of what you expect in this kind of setting, but the child's choir is a perfect fit. And Olivier does have a resume of being a bit outside the box for game compositions. He would go on to compose the 2008 Alone in the Dark. Now that game is all over the place on the quality front, which I'll get to someday soon.
Now give me my stone. I don't have your stone, and fuck you anyway.
But I doubt you'll find many people questioning the quality of its soundtrack. A soundtrack that uses a female Bulgarian choir, resulting in music that's little like it. Olivier wouldn't be the only one who would go on to work on the 2008 Alone in the Dark. ObsCure's developer, Hydravision Entertainment, would develop the PS2 and Wii version of Alone in the Dark, ones that differ from the 360, PS3, and PC version. But we'll get to those games in a future video. This French approach to a very American setting helps give ObsCure a unique flair. I'm not only talking the soundtrack. You can end up with interesting results when you have a different country tackle a setting of another, something Japanese game studios are well versed in. And for ObsCure, Hydravision delivers a je ne sais quoi factor to its approach, both in the literal and figurative sense. So what's going on here at Leafmore High? When we find Principal Freeman, he's very upset to see us still at school.
Mr. Friedman, it's total chaos.
Why are you still here? Why aren't you at home?
There are these slimy creatures. They're all over and they're attacking us.
Here on the school grounds?
Yes, they're everywhere. You've got to do something before it gets worse. Kenny's missing and Mr. Walden, he's
is here?
Yeah, I saw him in the attic.
Go right now and see that he'll let you out. I'll tell him you're coming. And don't let me see you back until tomorrow morning.
But those
I'll take care of everything. The best thing you can do for now is to get out of here.
Through our travels, we begin to piece things together about him. This one Herbert Freeman had a twin brother, Leonard, last seen in 1921. He died in a plane crash, or so they say. Leonard's body was never found. And for good reason. It was a mere cover-up of what was actually going on at Leafmore High. Leonard and Herbert were born in the 1800s. Both inquisitive scientists, they discovered Mordophilia, a rare plant in Africa. A plant that opened up the possibilities of eternal life. When they reported their findings, the scientific community rejected them for its immoral nature. At the turn of the 20th century, the Freeman brothers founded Leafmore High, a means of gathering guinea pigs for their continuing experiments. Leonard himself would be a test subject in 1903. The experiments resulted in Leonard taking on a tree-like form and could not face exposure to sunlight. Herbert locked Leonard up underneath the school. Miss Wixon, the school's nurse, was also born in the 1800s. She is Leonard's husband. She and Herbert realized it was going to take years to find a cure for Leonard's mutation. They would expose themselves to the Mordophilia spores. This gave them eternal life, although they did not mutate the way Leonard did. They too could not go into the sunlight. So by now there's a good chance you're thinking, how did they cover this up for so long? How did no one seem to realize that Herbert and Miss Wixon were immortal? It's not like they're exactly subtle about covering it up either. In the auditorium, we could see a range of photos spanning many years, where Herbert looks the same. Herbert leaves notes everywhere. What made this auditorium photo cutscene funnier was that I was playing as Josh. You know Josh, the inquisitive one, trying to get a scoop?
How bizarre. Herbert looks just the same in these old photos as he does now. It's freaky.
To be fair, he is a teenager. He's still got some work to do if he wants to become a reporter. His current skills might make him ideal for somewhere like Kotaku, but I'd like to think he has higher ambitions. Now, it is possible there are times where Herbert has stepped away from being the principal before returning, but there's nothing in the game that suggests that. But here's the thing with schools. People come and go. Students have their time at the school and move on. They might attend a class reunion down the road. Parents send their children to schools. They'll have knowledge of their teachers and staff, but once again tend to move on when their children graduate. I'm sure we've all had a teacher or principal who seemed old at the time. You'll think about them years later and decide to look them up to realize they're still teaching. They seemed old back then, it must be ancient now. I have to think that's what went on here. No one put two and two together. Well, not exactly true. What about the students that got a bit too inquisitive? Well, they become perfect test subjects. Dozens of students disappeared over the years. And of course on that front you must be thinking, how did the school never shut down? Why weren't there thorough investigations into disappearances of students? The sequel addresses this. The Freeman brothers, despite their banishment from the scientific community, have friends in high places. We'll find notes scattered throughout to put these pieces together. Near the game's end, we'll come across a logbook from a student in 1969 that gives one large info dump of almost everything put together in one nice little package.
It's December 2nd, 1969. My name is Alan Gardner, and this is my diary. 26. I have now counted 26 cases of missing persons connected with the school. Strange that the police have never come up with anything about it. Our school was founded in 1902 by twin brothers Herbert and Leonard Friedman. Herbert is still our principal. That would mean he's at least 100 years old. I just found their birth certificates. Judging by that
How
date,
have they stayed so young for so long?
I found this photo of a woman with Herbert, or Leonard. She looks a lot like Ms. Wixon. The photo is from
According
the
to
late
this marriage
19th century.
certificate,
Ms. Wixon and Leonard got married in 1885. Leonard was last seen in 1921. He supposedly died in a plane crash, but they never found his body, or even the plane. I found some articles about the Friedman brothers and their experiments, said to be so original that they went beyond
In
human
1890,
morality. They went on an expedition to Africa to find medicinal plants. They stayed for 6 months and brought back a large number of hitherto unknown varieties. One strange specimen, Mordophilia, became the basic subject of their research. Photos of disfigured people in his office. I absolutely must find his lab. Underneath the high school, in the basement. I managed to follow him unnoticed through the gardens to the basement of their house. I searched the lab, and according to Friedman's notes, the anti-aging serum is yet to be perfected. The photos of half-human creatures bear witness to the failed attempts. Prolonged exposure to the sun results in mutation. There's also a big door in one room. I don't know what's behind it, but I think I understand how to open it.
It's only now that the right crew of teenagers with attitude can get to the bottom of this, with a little help from Mr. Walden, the teacher who gave us a helping hand early on. We'll find him a couple of times throughout. He himself has become infected and doesn't have much time. He became aware of Herbert's experiments and found his hidden underground lab. It's through his actions that the monsters became free. We'll find Kenny down these maze-like basements, before Friedman gets the drop on us. He's now infected all 5 of us. We have until sunrise to find the antidote before we'll turn to these creatures. Miss Wixon tells us where we could find it before dying. Most likely this is the work of Mr. Walden for her death. We'll collect all the codes and items we need to make our way through the maze-like structures of the labs underneath the school. We'll witness Walden shooting and killing Herbert. While Herbert has the antidote, Walden's mutation is beyond the point of curing. And Mr. Walden himself meets his end, for at long last Leonard makes his grand entrance. Leonard serves as the game's final fight. If you're playing with an AI partner, this fight is best done solo. Tell him to stay put before heading in for the fight. He has some tricky attacks that the AI partner will struggle with. If you kept everyone alive until now, might as well continue to do so for the final boss. You'll get the game's best ending. In this ending, Ashley and Kenny embrace. Looks to be the same for Shannon and Josh. At least it looks that way. The game cuts to black right as it looks like they're about to kiss. Although most relationships emerging from intense experiences never seem to last, something made apparent in the sequel. As Stan approaches the antidote case, something off screen sends him flying. Sequel hook. And so ends ObsCure. As far as co-op couch horror goes, one of the better titles around. A title that nails the feeling of the American high school of its time frame, with a unique flair coming from a French studio. One you could have a fun couple of afternoons with. And there's more to come. A sequel would arrive around 3 years later. Before talking about the sequel, I want to talk more about the mid-2000s time frame when it comes to high school media and pop culture. ObsCure takes influence from several works, most notable being the 1998 Robert Rodriguez film The Faculty. It's a mashup of sci-fi horror in a high school setting. I call it a solid 3.5-star film that's worth checking out, blending elements of films like The Thing and Invasions of the Body Snatchers with teen drama. It's from that time frame when you had a nice blend of CGI mixed with practical effects, before it all became CGI and green screens. And it has quite the cast. Elijah Wood, Robert Patrick, Josh Hartnett, Jordana Brewster, Usher, Salma Hayek, Jon Stewart, along with several actors where you go, hey, it's that actor, where you have to look up their name after, like Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore or Spangler from Malcolm in the Middle. And you can't go wrong with a film kicking off the song The Kids Aren't Alright by The Offspring. Very 1998. The influence this movie has on ObsCure is more about its mood and feeling and less about the details, although they base Stan's fashion off Josh Hartnett's character. So if you're a fan of the games, you'll get a kick out of this film. ObsCure fits in well with all the other teen and high school related works around this time frame. I have to ask, now I am out of touch of most of the world, but does it seem like these kind of works no longer have the presence they once had in pop culture? Whether you were in high school during this time frame or aware of it through osmosis, these kind of works had a significant role in pop culture. Look at some of the movies coming out during this mid-2000s time frame. You had movies like Mean Girls, Superbad, Napoleon Dynamite, you had shows like The OC, and while MTV had more or less moved away from music by this point, they had reality shows up the wazoo to appeal to this kind of audience. The last major work that pops out to me of this kind of style is Easy A, and that's from 2010. Sure, there's been other movies or shows since then, but most of it lies within the streaming world. The rise of superhero films more or less shifted these kind of movies off the silver screen. Again, to be fair, I'm well in touch with most areas pop culture. I only keep up through a bit of osmosis. But it sure feels like these kind of works are nowhere near as commonplace or prominent in pop culture. Feel free to agree or point out otherwise in the comments. For I know it's shifted to places on social media like TikTok. Although looking at my audience demographics, most of you are in the same boat as me. With that, let's have ourselves a graduation. Let's move on from high school into the realm of university and college of ObsCure 2, the aftermath.
Why do we always have to go by car? We could have walked, and it wasn't even that far. I just don't get your infatuation with that thing.
That car's priceless, and you know it. I spent so much money on that thing, it's not even funny.
It's been 2 years since the Leafmore incident of the first game. ObsCure 2 shifts location to the nearby town of Fall Creek. 3 of the 5 characters return in the sequel. Kenny and Shannon are now attending university in Fall Creek. Kenny requires daily medication to deal with the contamination of Freeman's biological experiments. Shannon, for whatever reason, adapted to these contaminations and doesn't need daily medication. Stan is also a local in Fall Creek, although he's not attending university. Like Kenny, he requires daily medication to deal with the contaminations at Leafmore. He did a stint in prison, but he's now out working as a pizza delivery boy. And what about Ashley and Josh? There's no mention of what they're up to, although hold that thought for now. They will make an appearance later in the game if you're thorough in your explorations. I guess Ashley and Kenny broke up, and what looked to be the start of a relationship between Josh and Shannon didn't last. During this intro, we'll meet the rest of the cast, starting with Corey and his girlfriend May. They're off to have drinks at Sven's dorm room, another new cast member. At Sven's are the remaining 2 members of the cast, May's twin sister June and Amy. Kenny and Shannon will stop by for a brief moment. The group is hoping to get into the party at Delta Theta Gamma, a fraternity on campus. Before heading off, they indulge in a mixture of tea with strange black flowers. These strange black flowers began to spring up everywhere in the last few months. Students are using them as a drug, ones that induce strange but vivid dreams. As Corey will enter his dream world, along with May. In this Silent Hill-esque sequence, we'll witness the death of their friends before monsters come swarming in.
Where is the other half of me? I'm here, June! June! I need the other half of me. Look at me. See how satisfied I am. Pleasure has opened its petals inside my body. A new flower will blossom, and it will be the one that men will not have.
Corey awakens with what looks to be a nasty hangover, but all it takes is one energy drink to snap out of it.
Oh, that's much better. That's much better.
Finding May, they head off to the party at Delta Theta Gamma. May's twin sister June is going to sleep things off. We cut to Amy and Kenny also making their way to the party. Amy places Kenny into the friend zone as we head on in.
I hope there'll be some cute guys there.
Right. What about me then?
You're not a guy, Kenny. You're a friend.
No comment.
The twins, May and June, have friends in the fraternity, but the bouncer isn't letting Amy and Kenny in. As they sneak in the back door, the black flowers release spores and monsters swarm the fraternity. Partygoers lay dead. We'll cut back to May and Corey, who've now made their way to the party. Reunited with Amy and Kenny, they also meet Richard James, a biology professor on campus and a mentor to the Delta Theta Gamma Brotherhood. He's dissecting a corpse of one of the monsters, one that was once a student. It seems that through the power of energy drinks, we've warded off the flower's abilities to turn us into monsters. With that, we're off to find June and Sven, and get to the bottom of this mystery. Right off the bat, we'll know some key differences to the game's design. While the game still makes use of fixed camera angles, good stretches of the game gives us full control of the camera. Instead of having one central location, we'll move from point to point in a more linear setup. And the most notable shift is how the game dictates who we will play as. Instead of giving us the entire cast to choose from, the story unfolds with the characters in pairs. The pairings will switch up throughout the game. ObsCure 2 uses a meanwhile back at the ranch structure of switching from pairing to pairing. We'll reach a climax with one pairing before switching to another as they try to get to the bottom of this mystery. This shift in the lack of character choice has its pros and cons to it. On the positive side of things, it does allow each character's personalities to shine through more. Each character will have a unique ability in order for them to progress. Kenny drops the sprint ability from the first game. Here, he has the ability to move heavy objects. The same goes for Sven. Being Norwegian, Sven is all about the Norse mythology as part of his personality.
And as blonde as a Norwegian goddess, a Valkyrie.
Sven, you're taking the Scandinavian routine a little bit too far. I know that you were born in Norway, but really, you lived here all your life, didn't you?
Due to the events of the first game, Shannon is able to have some level of control over these spores. She's able to breathe them in and clear the way forward with a short little minigame. She's also taken on a different look this time around, more of a goth look. The last 2 years have been difficult on her. Stan still remains the local lockpick expert, now with a lockpicking minigame. Of all the lockpicking minigames out there, this has to be one of the better ones. Some of these locks could take several tries to make my way through. Trying to figure out how far up or down I could push each part of the lock can take some time to figure out. It's also satisfying once you do. Budding game developers, if you're looking for inspiration of a lockpicking minigame, look to ObsCure 2 for guidance. And I will also note the same for its hacking minigame. May is a computer whiz and can use her PDA, yes, a PDA, not a cell phone, to hack open locked doors. Have you ever played Wordle? Well, you'll be right at home with this hacking minigame. It's a simplified version of Wordle. You have a select amount of letters to choose from, you have as many attempts as you like, and each answer is a famous person. I guess the creator of Wordle was a fan of the ObsCure series? Too bad there's less than a handful of these hacking minigames. It's one of the better ones I've come across. May's boyfriend Corey is the acrobat of the crew. His love of skateboarding and daring theatrics makes him fearless in his climbing abilities. The only thing he loves more than his car is May. Bringing up Sum 41 again, there's no doubt in my mind they based his appearance off Derek Whibley. As well, there's mention of a band Sub 42 in the game, a nice little nod to the band. Amy's the girl all guys long for, and Miss Wet t-shirt on campus. She is the group decipherer. Through her ability, we get the classic minigame of realizing puzzle pieces in the right order. Simple, but a nice little palate cleanser. May's twin sister June doesn't have any special abilities. There's only one stretch where we play as her, and that part is even optional. If we're too late in rescuing her, she'll die. If we do reach her in time, we play her in a classic survival horror stretch. Sven and May guide her through the security cameras. We'll need to adjust the picture quality as we go. But no matter what, June will die. The game will kill off characters as we progress as the story demands for it. Remember how I said May's hacking minigame could have gotten more mileage? It's because she meets her end fairly early on. So what happens if a character dies in game while playing? We get a game over and kick back to the last save point.
Corey, no! Corey!
Unlike the first game, there's no permanent death through gameplay. It's one of those cases of the game taking steps forward but taking steps back at the same time, losing some of that unique flair that the original had. Due to the shift in character pairings, ObsCure 2 does address a major issue I had with the first game, the lack of inter-party banter. Beyond the game's opening moments, story beats and cutscenes had to take a more generic approach to the character combinations, choices that the player could make. With ObsCure 2 taking control of the pairings, we're able to get banter that flesh out their characters. They find the right balance of length, placement, and humor.
I hope Stan is okay.
Ah, seems you like him.
I'm just relieved that I'll see him again. That's all.
Now, Shannon, I think you have a crush on him. Yeah, you do.
Ugh, okay. Forget it, you adolescent little boy.
Don't worry, Shannon. It happens to everybody, you know. By the way, did you know Amy's crazy about you?
Maybe.
All you need to do is stay alive, and she needs to stay alive. I can hear the wedding bells already.
Let's just hope they don't turn out to be funeral bells.
While ObsCure 2 takes a more linear approach of moving locale to locale, the game takes advantage of these pairings and abilities to build out environments. Corey will have stretches where he uses teamwork with Sven. He'll use a combination of acrobatics and strength to progress. Some areas will revisit as other pairings and use their abilities to progress a different way. There are some odd moments in ObsCure 2 when a group of characters reunite. For a short stretch, we'll get to pick and choose who we play as, like we could in the first game. The thing is, unless you get lucky with who you pick, it's an additional frustration that didn't need to be in the game. For example, carrying on from the game's intro after meeting the professor of biology on campus, Richard James. We could choose between Kenny, Corey, May, and Amy. Thing is, to progress, we need to select Corey and Kenny. There's an object in the room that requires Kenny to move. The next room requires Kenny to move a large object, and Corey to use his acrobatics to progress. So if you took May or Amy with Kenny, you'd have to come back, swap them out for Corey, and then progress. Another frustrating example is in the game's end stretch. The game allows us to choose between Amy, Shannon, Stan, and Corey. A couple of rooms over, we'll need Corey's acrobatics to continue forward. And right after that climb is a locked door that requires Stan's lockpicking ability. So if you don't have Stan with you, head back a couple of rooms to swap him in. They were better off not having these options at all with how the game's structure works. Through cutscenes, the game does a decent job of splitting off the various character combinations we'll play as. It's like they want to throw a bone to fans of the original game by giving more choice to the player for short stretches. Still, unless you pick the right combination, it adds a layer of frustration that didn't need to be there. Another shift to ObsCure 2 is how combat plays out. It's less arcade-like and more akin to an over-the-shoulder third-person shooter. Between the releases of both games was Resident Evil 4, a landmark title that still influences games to this day. One that no doubt had an influence on ObsCure 2's combat. They did streamline some elements of the combat system. There's no need to use a light source on enemies to open them up for damage. no frying up enemies by smashing windows to let light in. A feature that helped the first game stand out, and one I found puzzling in its removal. Gun ammo is far more stingy. For large stretches of the game, I would use a firearm and give my AI partner a melee weapon to use. Due to the removal of permanent deaths and switching to a more conventional game over, characters take far more damage before dying. While we can find health items in their journeys, we can also make our own. Most monsters will drop a heart upon death. We can use a syringe to collect a blood sample. Collect enough of them and we'll create a serum to heal ourselves. It gives some incentive to fight monsters as opposed to running past them. That said, combat itself can likely result in damage, and it's not like these are wide spaces to run past most enemies. We'll have access to a couple of weapons that use a charge. Ones that we can replenish at electric panels. One notable weapon is the stun gun. A great way of clearing out roofs involves one using the stun gun while the other shoots or smacks around a downed enemy. The item swapping system, something the first game did so well, has some overhauls. You can hotkey up to 4 weapons per character. Despite the constant shifts and swapping of characters, we maintain a common inventory. Something that's fine by me. It does break a bit of the immersion, but allows for the developers to pace out the game without this worry. Better that than constant frustrations of shifting inventories. Swapping items is no longer done in real time, but in the pause menu. If you're in a situation where you want to give your AI partner a gun, pause the game and give them the gun from the shared inventory. In the rare cases where the game gives you the choice of swapping characters, it's now an automatic swap. No need to move items from one character to the other. That said, healing is still done in real time and not in the pause menu. Saving is once again limited, but takes a different approach in ObsCure 2. In the first game, we used discs as a one-time save at any point. Here, we'll save with these black flowers found on the walls. Each is a one-time save. Most have reasonable placement, with a couple stretches where they can be quite spread out. And whenever I would save, it always felt like I would awaken in the Hunter's Dream in Bloodborne due to the music track. On the note of music, it's as good as it was in the original. Olivier Derivière returns, and so do the choirs. There are some shifts to the track's composition. Olivier used the choirs as more of a texture as opposed to the main focus. The end result are some fantastic tracks where the choir melds with the instruments. There's nothing quite like it out there. How are things on the story front? While the shifts in character pairings help flesh out the characters, the whole story feels a bit uninspired and a retread of the first game. That said, the constant shifts in character pairings does prevent the story from stagnating, reaching a climax of one section before cutting to another pairing. After escaping the Delta Theta Gamma fraternity, our cast of characters will split up. Sven and May head back to campus to find May's twin sister, June. Corey and Amy go after someone who stole Corey's car. Kenny heads off to the hospital as he's in need of medication to deal with the exposure to spores. In the woods, Amy and Corey will come across an article about the stalker of Fall Creek Forest, a brooding figure that's captured several people over the last year. We'll come across him and get a good look at him during this stretch. Despite the game's release year of 2007, at least in Europe, it was 2008 in the West, and the fact that cell phones were present in the first game, the game makes use of walkie-talkies. As mentioned earlier, May uses a PDA for hacking. I guess you could get away with this during this time frame, but even a year or two later would have had this feeling antiquated. Corey and Amy make it to the hospital and await Sven and May's arrival with June once they find her. Kenny and Shannon are also at the hospital, looking for medication. Switching back to Sven and May, we're on a timer to rescue June. Either we make it in time and play the fixed camera section I talked about earlier as June, else a monster will kill her. And even if we do make it, she will die at the end of the fixed camera section.
Is something wrong?
It's June! She's dead!
What? What happened? May?
Oh,
May, answer!
I can't leave her
May,
like
please,
this.
we need to go!
Switching back to Amy and Corey, they'll discover the monsters have made their way to the hospital. Notes found state that sex results in faster spread of these spores.
So students turned into monsters because they got busy without using protection?
They should have known better. You should always use contraceptives.
Well, it's a little bit too late for a morality lesson now.
Kenny, without medications, succumbs to the spores and turns into a monster, despite Shannon's pleas.
Grow up and save your life, please.
Quick!
Get out of here!
With everyone now at the hospital, we'll have a fight against a transformed Kenny as Corey and May. At which point, Kenny kills May. No more Wordle hacking minigames. Now Shannon and Stan enter the fold as playable characters, looking to put an end to Kenny, although Kenny himself escapes to fight another day. Having Kenny become an antagonist is a bit of a bold choice. It's easy to lose the audience when you take someone who was once a protagonist and playable character and make him a villain. Of all the 5 playable characters from the first game, Kenny does make for the best choice on that front. He fulfills the jock trope of the group. You can once again see the influence of the faculty film on the story. The picking off of characters one by one who are succumbing to the parasite. Swerving off the road to avoid hitting a monster, the gang ends up at the Fall Creek Dam. The gang once again splits off into separate groups. Amy on her own ran to Kenny, who had his way with her. Once again we have another fight with Kenny, who once again flees to fight another day. Heading deeper into the woods, Sven and Amy come across an old house. The stalker mentioned in the paper that Corey and Amy saw earlier attacks Amy and Sven. Cutting back to Stan and Shannon, at which point Stan becomes the man. He gives Shannon a good reason to fight.
Do you want a better reason to fight?
Reaching the old house where Amy and Sven came across earlier, the game slows down for a stretch, in a good way. We get some time to explore this lone house in the woods. The game's atmosphere reaches its peak. You could hear the cries of Sven some distance away on the regular, along with a chainsaw. We learn that this stalker is Jediah Friedman, the son of Leonard Freeman and Elizabeth Wixon, the school nurse from the first game. He was born around the turn of the 20th century. The mutations of his father had an impact on him. His parents would more or less go on to leave him as is, which does help explain why there wasn't any mention of him in the first game. It shouldn't come as a surprise by now that Jediah kills Sven.
You're dead!
Sven! Sven! Don't leave me!
Chasing after Jediah in the underground passages beneath the house, Shannon and Stan come across familiar territory. Yep, we're back at Leafmore.
Stan Jones. Average F. It's strange. I don't feel any nostalgia for this place.
Shannon Matthews, A+. And look where it has gotten us.
The story does establish that Fall Creek is not far from Leafmore. As well, we've covered plenty of ground in our journeys. It's a nice little aha moment. It's not the entire school, but a small portion of it. Most of it lies in ruins. The way the story unfolds, it felt like a natural progression as opposed to fan service. Catching up to Jediah, Stan, and Corey, we'll find him tending to his father Leonard. Yes, we didn't kill him the first time around. Leonard is the source of these flowers.
Dad? This rotten old tree?
I don't believe it. It's Friedman. I thought we killed him 2 years ago.
It's this jerk who injected us with the black spores when he was still principal. I need to take daily medication because of this jerk.
We'll kill them both in a boss fight and roll credits? Huh. Felt a little bit anticlimactic. Did they run out of time? There are several unanswered questions here. Well, turns out that's all a ruse. We get a post-credits scene with Richard, the biology professor, revealing his true intentions. He's continuing the work of the Freeman brothers. He takes a heavily pregnant Amy away and locks up Stan and Shannon in the back of another ambulance. Which sounds like quite the cliffhanger and a sequel hook. But once again, that's a ruse. The mordophilia causes the ambulance to crash, with Stan and Shannon escaping. We still have the game's final act to play. I have to wonder how this would play out if they didn't do the fake out. Instead of rolling the credits, have the story continue as is. It did give me a bit of a jolt in my feelings about the game, one of feeling let down and disappointment. When the credits started to roll, I went, that's it? I did have a chuckle when I realized what was going on, and where we ended up. We crashed nearby the Delta Theta Gamma fraternity, where we began the game. For a time, we have next to no gear on us. Every shot and attack counts. While the game hasn't drowned us in resources up until now, it's a nice change of pace. Each encounter carries far more weight as we make our way through the fraternity. We enter an area we couldn't access before, and get some answers about this fraternity. One room contains many remains from Leafmore. This includes the first mortophilia from Africa the Freeman brothers brought back. The fraternity shows great interest in the works of the Freeman brothers. The fraternity has ties with them all the way back to the early 1900s. The President of the United States at the time was an honorary member of the fraternity. He pledged any kind of support required for the fraternity, a pledge to ensure each new American president kept this pact alive. There were hints in the first game the Freeman brothers had friends in high places. I mean, how else were they able to get away with missing students over the years? That said, with their actions in the first game, it did feel like the Freeman brothers were more on their own as opposed to having large backing that goes all the way to the top. The fraternity itself has strong ties to the occult. Jared Crowley, an obvious nod to Aleister Crowley, found the fraternity sometime in the 18th century. As well, you can learn about the fate of Ashley and Josh in the fraternity. Through ObsCure 2, you can find small keys to collect. You'll come across these item boxes that need 3 keys to unlock. Most will give the player a new weapon to use. Thing is, you need to unlock all the chests to learn the fate of Ashley and Josh. I did miss a couple of the keys, so I'm grabbing the footage off YouTube here. It's a video recording of Ashley exploring the ruins of Leafmore, with Josh as the cameraman. Jediah attacks them, grabbing the camera, hinting at their fate. You'd think Stan and Shan would have something to say about this, but they don't. The cast has been dropping off left and right throughout ObsCure 2. Bit of a bummer to see what happens to Ashley and Josh. We'll head to the nearby stadium for our final battle with Kenny. Corey is there with Kenny taunting him, but Corey decides to take fate into his own hands and refuses to become a monster.
You know what, Kenny? There's only one person I ever belonged to. And it was May.
So now we're down to Stan, Kenny, and Shannon from the original cast, and a heavily pregnant Amy. This is a pretty frustrating final fight. We need to drop 4 platforms on top of Kenny. It could take a bit for the opportunity to open up. First 2 are easy. Have both of the characters pull down these switches. The final 2 amp up on the tension. One requires Shannon's minigame to clear the mortophilia out of the way. And in a brutal middle finger to the player, the last switch requires Stan to lockpick with time constraints. It's easier than most of the other lockpicks. There's one in the end stretch in the fraternity that took me a few minutes to get through. But I let out a "oh no" when I realized what I need to do to access the last switch. In his dying breaths, Kenny tells Shannon to take care of his child. Richard, the biology professor, takes off in a helicopter with Amy. A source of mortophilia surrounds the helicopter, causing it to explode and crash. A safe bet that Richard, Amy, and her unborn child are dead, leaving us with only Shannon and Stan. As the mortophilia spreads, they decide to take this fight to the top and put an end to things once and for all.
This is finally the end of it?
I don't know. But it is time to cut all family ties, once and for all.
Rock and roll, baby. Rock and roll.
And now the credits once again roll. Now we're done. Or are we? No, I'm kidding, that's the end of the game. A much more complete ending, and one that leaves things open to a sequel. I have to commend ObsCure 2 for being bold with killing off characters. It gives us varying amounts of time to play, learn, and care about these characters before picking them off one by one. It's a fun little cast that the developers gave more time to shine in their personalities. That said, I'm a bit mixed on some of the implications of the wider scope of the ObsCure world, one involving higher-ups in the American government, all the way up to the president. While there were hints of the Freemans having friends in high places, I did like the feeling the first game went with instead. Rogue scientists banished by the scientific community using a school to carry out their experiments. Besides, how are Shannon and Stan, a couple of teenagers with attitude, going to take on the powers that be and the mortophilia? Well, that's a question that remains unanswered to this day. ObsCure 2 in a way marks the tail end of the 6th generation. Despite its release in 2007 in Europe and early 2008 in the West, it saw a PS2, PC, and Wii release. not a release on Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3. Both games make use of the Renderware engine, the engine that powered so much of the 6th generation of gaming. Due to coming under EA ownership and EA themselves deciding to go with Unreal Engine, Renderware would putter out around this time frame. Focus Home Interactive acquired the game's developer, Hydravision Entertainment. Rebranded as Mighty Rocket Studios, they developed the game's spin-off, Final Exam, one that went through a few title changes. One initial name was ObsCure, Final Exam. Due to fan backlash, they removed ObsCure from the title. Why? Well, the game went for a 2D beat-em-up approach, and appears to be non-canon. Shannon makes an appearance, but there's no real progress on the story front with where ObsCure 2 ended. I have to note how fan backlash resulted in them removing ObsCure from the title. The game saw release in late 2013. Could you imagine studios doing that now due to fan backlash? These days, they double down and tell you, you will buy it, and you will like it. Well, it's too bad we never saw a conclusion to its overarching story. ObsCure is another one of those quirky, unique horror games to pop up in the mid-2000s. Ones that nailed the feel of that mid-2000s American high school, courtesy of French developers. Whether co-op or on your own, they offer quality experiences. It's crazy to me how underutilized the high school setting is for horror gaming. It's such a ripe setting to set a game around. If you're a fan of what I cover on the channel, it may be time for a revisit after all these years. Or if you haven't gotten around to the series, do consider giving them a shot. And with that, class dismissed. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the channel further, do consider joining your fellow Boulder Punchers on Patreon or YouTube memberships. You'll get early access to videos, be featured in the credits, receive periodic updates, and my undying gratitude.
I borrowed a battery pack from the hospital. I modified it so it would be compatible with your equipment. It will last longer.
Really? You can do that sort of thing?
Of course. I may be a biology teacher, but I also surf the internet.
Oh, yeah. Right.